The next part of the crisis is really a shame. It is a crisis of shame. Since the Boy Crisis book has come out, more of the letters that I've gotten from parents have been about what their sons are experiencing in school. Parents tell me that as early as 7th grade, they're hearing negative things from their teachers about boys and men. They're hearing in school that masculinity is what?
Toxic.
Toxic, yes. Toxic, by the way, was the Oxford University Dictionary's #1 word of 2018, and guess what it was mostly an adjective for?
Okay.
So the future, and they're hearing that the future is female, that they have male privilege, that they're part of a patriarchal system dominated by men to benefit men at the expense of women, that men are the oppressors, women the oppressed, that if they succeed at work, it's because of their male privilege, if they fail, it's because they're losers. When I interview a teenage boy, if he's in private conversation or just with other boys, he'll be open to sharing that his sexual desire wants about 70% of the girls in his class, some more than others. But he fears that if he acts on his feelings too soon or too quickly, he's what? A sexual harasser. If he acts too slowly, he's a wimp. He wonders why equality, if he's really sharp, he wonders why equality doesn't include women sharing these risks of rejection and responsibility. Not by option, which women now have, the option to do that, but by expectation. In college, he hears about books titled The End of Men. Imagine, anticipating the end of men is not exactly an inspiration for our son's life journey. The crisis of shame is part of what contributes to our son's depression, alienation, and withdrawal. It contributes to the crisis of mental health, and so you have a whole circular effect that is reinforced by something that we can really address in our schools, the crisis of shame. But before we can best prepare our sons for the future, we have to understand the challenges that boys are facing. All boys today are caught up in a transition from growing up the way growing up male was in the past to what they're experiencing in the present. And anticipating their most important role, the role as dad, boys are in transition from among 3 stages. And so I'm going to be sharing this with you because every one of you that I've met are just devoted, loving, caring dads. But there's oftentimes political ideologies don't allow us to clarify what are the stages that dads are going through, what are the stages that men and women are going through, and how do you help your son navigate these stages. Stage 1 is what I'll call this is a traditional marriage. This is mostly the stage that was dominant in the past, what I'll call the era of fathers catch-22 fathering. The era of fathers catch-22 fathering. In the past, a dad's role was to love his family by being away from the love of his family or at work. The qualities dad learned to become successful at work, like figuring out solutions as employees are talking. If Patrick here is coming to me about a new design for a Boeing aircraft engine, I have to say, who are the other competitors for that design? How will this be adapted in China? What is your history of dependability as a company? And 100 other questions. If I'm a good CEO, I'm asking those questions in my mind while Patrick is talking. But the problem is that the qualities that dads learn to be successful at work, which is figuring out solutions as employees are talking, often made him unsuccessful in love. Figuring out solutions while his family was talking, rather than focus on what the feelings are, or the words are, or the heart problem is of what his family is sharing with him. In the past, with little permission for divorce, the good news was that nevertheless, children were at least experiencing stability. The bad news was that many children also experienced parents who were living in a minimum security prison marriage, which didn't give them the feeling of real security, but it was all they could expect at that time. So that's the past, where the great majority of marriages, particularly in non-African American communities, were this traditional family that I just described, the father's catch-22 family. Stage 2 is the present. We still have about a third of families with traditional father's catch-22 marriages. But we also have now a new era, which is the dichotomous era of fathers who are more absent than they've ever been before, and on the other part of the dichotomy, more present than they've ever been before. And so we have, in a sense, 3 parts to this dichotomous era. About a third of children have minimal or no father involvement, the dad-deprived children, and about a third who have dads who are more present and involved than dads have ever been. Those children are dad enriched. You can go to any playground on a weekend and see fathers much more involved than probably your dad ever was. When I interviewed my dad just before he passed away, and asked him about his life and his father, and I said, well, what's the conversations your dad had with you? And he kept avoiding that question. And finally, when I pressed him on it, as I tend to do, he said, well, actually, Warren, I never had a conversation with my father. And compare that to the level of involvement that you have with your children and that you see among many dads who have not been alienated from their children.